Perfect. Welcome to our Friday morning management training. Everybody, it's nice to have you here. And I'm going to see Ivan. Will you do me a favor and read the um,
Carrie,
culture? Yes.
can we just introduce Tara to everybody quickly in case they're wondering who this new face is?
Yep. I'm going to do that. We kind of introduced her and talked a little bit, but I will do that in just a second. I'm going to just do the culture piece real quick, and then we'll do a little introduction. So.
Cool.
Okay. Hang on. Okay, Ivan, when you see that,
Sure. All right. Deliver results. We deliver on our commitments to our clients and our employees. We deliver on our commitments to each other and our stakeholders.
perfect. Thank you. So, delivering results is just what we do. It's just part of, and Tara, I know that when we talked before you started, you came on before, delivering results was an important thing. You've been at this a long time. And so do you want to tell everybody just kind of where you came from and how long you've been in the business and just a little bit about you, and where you're residing, so that everybody knows where you're residing.
Okay, sure. Once again, my name is Tara Jackson. I'm coming from Elite Staffing. I worked for Elite for 14 years, but I've been in the industry for 25. I live here in Georgia, in Hampton, which is approximately 45 minutes to an hour from our location here in Georgia. And I have a vast amount of experience in staffing. My previous position, I was a national operations manager where I managed 16 states with clients. Most of my clients were light industrial clients, food manufacturing, waste recycling, just a whole gamut of light industrial business. So that's what brings me here. I'm very happy about our new beginnings here in Georgia, and we are off to a good start this week.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Tara was on, I don't know, it was probably the end of June you came on, I think, and went through one of the management training classes with us.
Yes.
But she just hadn't started quite yet, but she was just kind of watching what we do a little bit. So welcome to the team officially.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited for you. So, all right. Well, let's get going. So today we were supposed to read chapter 6 and first break all the rules, especially in the art of tough love. Okay. So Kyle is going to, this is his wheelhouse, all of the stuff that's going to be talked about today, not just in the book, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that talks about, just understanding people a little bit more on their performance, what happens if we have to have hard talks, what happens for terminations, those sorts of things. So, and Kyle's got all of that lined out. There's going to be some, some presentation pieces that he'll be doing as well. So I'll be watching for your hands going up. If for some reason we kind of miss you, and we can't see you, just holler at us. Okay. That's okay to do that. So take good notes. And I'll turn it over to Kyle. Kyle.
Well, great. Yeah. I'm going to ask to tag team a little bit with Carrie today, because in my outline, I have It's the Manager, chapter 27. So I actually don't have chapter 6 on my outline. Maybe I have an old outline, Carrie.
I wrote down chapter 27 on Friday.
Yeah.
I think he did say chapter 6 though on Friday.
I did last week.
Okay.
I just said everybody do chapter 6, first break all the rules. So
okay.
But that's okay. It's okay.
We'll kind of work together on that today, because I have put things together about the other items on the outline there. So
yeah.
let's start with chapter 27 from It's the Manager. Who has done that reading?
And that one's actually for next week.
Oh, I think I am into next week. Am I in the next week's? I might have prepared next week's.
So hang on just a second. Let me just pull this up real quick so we don't get off on the wrong deal here. And we'll get through it. Don't worry. Hang on just a second. Let me just share this. So if everybody can see that. So this week, Smart Truth 15, how to hold someone accountable, reprimands, termination, the art of tough love. Next week is the team leader breakthrough. It's the manager, chapter 27. So how to conduct a team meeting, team dynamics, and that sort of thing. So that's next week. But this week is, how to hold someone accountable, reprimands, termination, and the art of tough love. So what do you think, Kyle?
I think I made a mistake, and I didn't see Smart Truth 16, and I've combined 27 with some of Smart Truth 15 stuff, and for some reason I don't have chapter 6 on my outline.
Okay,
that's okay. We're gonna get through this, and we'll save some of my preparation for next week. So,
yeah, and I'll help on the tough love thing. I think the big thing is just performance, reprimands, that sort of thing. I think that's where we really want to focus with your, especially with your talent and your position in the company. That kind of fits with your stuff. So.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and begin a presentation in that regard. And then Carrie, you're probably a little more prepared on chapter 6 than I am. If you can kind of come behind me, and we'll just kind of
absolutely.
We'll mash these two together today. All right. I apologize for the confusion, everybody, but this will still turn out to be really good, and I've got some stuff that's really helpful for managers, and there's a lot of things in this little training and simple training that managers often get wrong, and it's myself included too, but this is I'm going to go ahead and share as soon as I can set this up fast. I'm going to share my screen really quickly. You guys have to tell me what you see.
Okay, we see little people.
Little people. Okay, good. I don't know if my thing is operating properly. I'm going to have to disconnect the screen again.
Kyle, are you frozen? Oh, I thought he was just disconnecting, guys. Looks like he's frozen. And he'll be back on in just a second, because I know that happens to his computer sometimes. So can everybody see like a black section on there? Is that what you're getting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, there we go. Yeah, we can hear you,
I
Kyle. We just can't see anything.
Okay. Yeah. Second here.
Now we see your screen.
Okay, and I don't see my presentation here, so I think I know what must have happened. It's on the other screen that's disconnected. Give me a second.
No problem. So as Kyle's doing that, let's just, I just want to make sure if you can take a look inside of chapter 6, which the whole chapter is not the art of tough love, but there's a section on there called the art of tough love that we want to have as part of our discussion. So you may have read it already before. I've read it a couple of times, a few times, but it jives very closely with what Kyle's going to share again with performance, reprimands, terminations, correct fit, all of those sorts of things. So, and we'll get into that, but hopefully you've had a chance to read, or if you don't, you can at least open it up to that section and be kind of browsing through it a little bit and making sure. So if you haven't had a chance to read it, just kind of make sure you've got that chapter or section of the chapter marked. It's not a long section. So, okay, Kyle, we see on-site training part 3.
Do you see the slides or do you see the full presentation mode?
We see that we can see the slides off to the side.
Oh, okay. Now what do you see? Full presentation?
Now it's the full presentation.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody, and sorry about the little technical difficulties there. Today I'd like to talk about counseling, coaching, and corrective action. Some of the things we don't like to have to deal with much as managers, but there are very good ways of going about this, and this will really get into that. An effective disciplinary system includes the following items: definite policies and procedures, defined supervisory roles and responsibilities, clear communication of rules, employer burden of proof, consistent treatment, consideration of circumstances, reasonable rules and penalties. Companies that have all these things put together will have a setup that'll help them avoid a lot of pitfalls that managers fall into when having to correct course with an employee. Statute of limitations, of course. Who has heard of due process and what that means?
I've heard of it. I don't know all of the details of it.
Probably some constitutional amendment type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Well, when we get into an issue with an employee, it's important that they have the right to discuss their side of things. And that becomes part of the information that's being considered for in the investigation, right? When we investigate, we should investigate facts, not feelings. We take a presumption of innocence approach. What would that mean? What is a presumption of innocence approach?
Innocent until proven guilty, right?
That's right. That's
More of
right.
a fact-finding mission and less of a accusatory situation.
Right. We approach the, let's say a complaint comes up about somebody or something. We take a real blank, neutral approach to things. We know absolutely nothing until facts start to come out in that investigation. Now, the accused has the right to defend their position, as well as anybody else in a case. A person cannot be compelled to speak or be manipulated with leading questions to self-incriminate. Very important point here. It's one of these pitfalls that managers fall into is we oftentimes go into a guilty approach, and then we kind of lead people into self-incrimination. It's a very, very tough pitfall to avoid. Unless we're very careful about the facts that we dig up. Due process means that corrective actions follow an acceptable procedure that protects the employees from arbitrary and capricious treatment. When we do investigations, we should really get into the who, what, where, why, when, and how of things. Include dates and times, persons involved, and other evidences that come. Maintain confidentiality as far as a thorough investigation permits. Sometimes that's hard when you have witnesses involved. Investigating performance must include clearly provable specifics, behaviors, performance metrics, for example. A company can establish clear behavioral, if a company can establish clear behavioral or measurable evidence of violation of policy, then corrective action and termination can be the result. But not leading somebody in there because we think they are guilty of something. Attitudes or feelings about a situation with no specific evidence of behaviors do not provide proof of a violation. Oftentimes, we managers go into things, we hear something and then we form an attitude about that issue. It's really important to kind of put all of our feelings aside and be neutral as we go into these investigations. Hard to do because we all have our biases and we're all affected by information that comes to us. Nevertheless, we need to put that aside. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Kyle, I think that's an important point right there. So you're going to have attitudes and feelings, but not use them unless you have evidence, right? So the evidence and proof are what's going to, really be the right meaning, because it's pretty tough to not have an attitude or a feeling, but acting on that attitude and feeling without evidence or proof is where we get ourselves in trouble.
That's right. Yeah, and we've all fallen into that, and we've jumped to conclusions because of that.
Yeah.
How we treat witnesses. Inform them of the investigation. We share only relevant information as it pertains to that witness and require a witness to maintain full confidentiality. It's sometimes tough. It's tough to bring in other people into these sometimes, but we have to do that. Ask simple, relevant questions and let the witness talk. Really, that's really about what we should be doing as managers in these cases too, is just asking questions and let people talk, and then take notes on everything that you can gather information on. Preponderance of evidence. Now, these are a lot of terms. In employment law, we don't have a standard like criminal law. Criminal law is a beyond reasonable doubt standard. In employment law, we have a preponderance of evidence standard, which means it means the weight of evidence needs to be convincing, but it doesn't need to go through the rigor that a criminal case would go through, right? The greater weight of evidence or convincing probability that something is going on is the standard that we apply in employment law. Progressive corrective action. All of us have probably seen some system like this where there's multiple steps in a corrective action process. And these are good for lesser offenses, like little things, tardies, and maybe some misunderstandings about performance, and you can have a coaching session and reset or whatever. And the issue that can come with progressive corrective action is if we managers start to make promises in the future about the employment of that person. Obviously, there's still future ahead because it's within a steps thing. But we can run into what's called an implied contract if we start making promises in the future. Then they start holding us to promises, and we can then set ourselves up for issues, and that can compromise a company's at-will rights. A lot of terms here, guys. At will is basically an employer's right to terminate an employee for any reason or no reason, absent a contract or law, right? So we can create those contracts and lose at-will rights. We have to be very careful about our communications.
Can you give an example of something that somebody might make a promise of when we're doing that?
Let's say they've gotten a written warning, and for being late too much or whatever. And you say, if you can be on time for 6 months, I will we'll wipe your record clean, and you'll get and you'll be eligible for a raise at that time. And so what if the 6 months goes by, but we weren't very clear on what it meant to get that raise, and we've already promised it? They could use that against us as an implied contract, and if they're doing their homework and whatnot. So we just have to be very careful. We've also probably given them 6 months of employment for basically free. 6 months from now, when we start making promises far in the future, those things can become implied contracts, and it may stop us from justly terminating a person after a couple months, should we need to do that. Now, it's tough to prove, but if they got a good attorney, they could turn this thing on. They could turn these things on us. So we have to be just very careful about promises. Now, we like to make some promises because it helps motivate the corrective action too. We just have to be very careful about timelines and things like that. Or you can communicate them and say this is a conditional promise based on, and then you outline those other things that still keep control over keep the employer control over the employment situation. That's why these things should be written up and documented very well, and should provide the conditions in which a person can move forward from their warnings. Does that make sense? Oftentimes we don't write things up, we don't document things, but maybe they go home and they make some notes on things, and we can lose control over this situation. So we have to be very careful about implied contracts and at-will rights. Any questions on that at all? Thank you for the question, Carrie. Right, moving on. There are sometimes situations where we have to demote an employee. It's not fun to do, and it's usually very tough to demote people and get good results out of it. Sometimes a demotion is because of lack of competency. Now that's not a violation of policy. That's probably just they probably got promoted without needing to be promoted. We've talked a little bit about next rung on the ladder and things like that. We should really look into people's abilities to do the job and tap into people's talents and put right person, right seat on the bus, right person, right seat. When we don't do this, we can even set ourselves up for a potential demotion. If they're next rung on the ladder, but they've just gotten past their ability to perform well, in order to correct that, a demotion may be necessary. So one thing that I think we can study, this is a question down here, maybe some homework that we could do, or just a thought. How do we help an employee cope with demotion? That is a big question, and a tough one to handle.
Hey, Kyle, I think this is let me just interject.
Sure.
If you read The Art of Tough Love in chapter 6, it really covers that part. Do any of you did any of you read chapter 6? Did you do chapter 6 at all? Okay, so if you read chapter 6 in the book The Art of Tough Love, it talked about a guy that they were working for a auto dealership. Do any of you remember the story on that? So what happened there? I mean, this was an exact thing that Kyle just is talking about right here. And I love the terminology a little bit more. So we call it demotion, but in this particular situation, it really wasn't a demotion. What was it? Can you remember? Anybody?
Casting.
Say that again, Techie.
It's about casting him in the right place for him, for like his strengths and whatnot. So
Yeah.
And talents.
Yes. Ivan, did you have a comment on that too?
No, I was gonna say the same thing. The owner kind of jumped the gun and put him in a situation where he wasn't prepared to be in, so he had to send him back to the other smaller dealership.
Right. So that's exactly what Kyle just mentioned. I mean, it's exactly what he just mentioned. But rather than and the guy was a little upset. He said he was the guy who was telling him that he was going to be changing roles. Almost the guy looked like he was going to punch him, and but they talked through it. They changed his role, which seems like a demotion, but what it was a better fit for the person, and now he's very successful in that role. It wasn't so again, it goes back to hero's path, which is part of the same chapter, by the way. It goes back to hero's path and coach's path, and really looking at, and Kyle mentioned this, really looking at talent and knowing your people really well, so that when there's mistakes that are made, because we're human and it's going to happen. We're going to put people in the wrong spots. But if you know your people well enough, you're going to be able to really help them when there's a change. And again, not necessarily. Now, sometimes it is a demotion, right, Kyle? But other times it's just a change of roles that's a better fit for your talents and your strengths, and will make a person, much more successful. So I just wanted to interject that while we're right on this particular thing, because the very first part of that, The Art of Tough Love, talked about this exactly. I thought that was really, really good about that story. So anyway, back to you, Kyle.
Thanks, Kerry. I agree. I think one of the key things as a manager in situations like this is we have to demonstrate to the individual that we really care about their success. And we have to demonstrate that by making a role change, and I sure like the terminology much better than a demotion, although it will feel like a demotion. It will feel that way. If a person can capture the vision that this must happen, then I think you have a good chance of having a successful transition in this case. Easier said than done, but yes, it's really important to not have to get here in the first place. Moving on. Okay, we've talked about clean and green in the past. What is clean and green? I'm going to pick on Ashley Labrum. What is clean and green?
So it comes from setting up, what is his name? Anyways, it's setting the expectation and then letting the person get those results the way that they know how to.
Right. It's being very clear about the specifics of the job and metrics and giving them something, giving them a goal to shoot toward, right? If they don't have a goal, we're playing silly games with employees. Now, I put it that way because what do silly games do? They give us, they win us silly prizes. Silly games, silly prizes. If we're very clear, and this is not silly, a silly game, it's a very clear game, then we have the prize of great performance. And we also have the ability to evaluate their performance against the standard, right? And we have the ability to perform corrective action properly because the expectations have been clear. And without setting this up, almost everything prior to what I've just talked about kind of collapses. You just have people doing random and maybe arbitrary things for a company. And then when it comes to corrective action, there will likely be capricious and arbitrary treatment because there's not this piece has not been set up. This is a critical piece of a manager setting up with their employees.
This is and again, this in this particular book, First Break All the Rules, it's one of the 4 keys is clear expectations. And then we have the Q12, which we should be asking our people, the question is, do I understand, what my job is? Do I have clear expectation, know what's expected of me in my job? So clear expectations has been a part of what we've been studying and reading and part of the Q12, and we should be asking these questions with the Q12. So, it's very, in fact, I think it's in the first 6, do I know what's expected of me at work?
Yes, very important. And so the corrective action would be on the manager to reset and reestablish expectations, right? A lot of terms here. Retributive justice is essentially, it kind of means punishment fits the crime, right? So violations of a more serious nature will skip those progressive corrective action steps. Oftentimes they'll lead straight to a termination or suspension or pending investigation type things. This would be like misconduct, insubordination, drug use at work, embezzlement, larger things like this. Certainly are not going to go through a verbal warning, a written warning, that sort of thing. That is called retributive justice. It's important to not box ourselves in to just a corrective progressive action method when there are more serious items to consider. So, any questions so far? I saw Joe's hand go up earlier, and I think I missed him. Joe, did you have a comment about something, perhaps even on a past slide?
Not a question. You'd asked what was clean and green, and I wanted to be able to provide the answer, but you got Ashley before I did. So.
Okay. All right. Thanks. And sorry I just caught you a little late there, Joe. Okay, suspension pending investigation. This is a tough one. Sometimes we don't have enough, yet we have a person that perhaps could be dangerous to the company. We don't know. And so we need to clear them from the workplace while we conduct a full investigation on somebody. And usually these are for more serious allegations, misconduct. The proper process is to really dig in and find out, and it may be a paid suspension. It may be conditional on whether or not on the findings. These are really tough cases. I've dealt with these in the past, and fortunately, I'll just say fortunately, they've turned out to be terminations. We had enough evidence to. I think it'd be really tough to bring a person back into the company if they were found innocent on something like this. But anyway, these are not fun to deal with. Delivering coaching and corrective action. This is a very key slide, guys. Any form of coaching and corrective action should not be punitive. There's a reason for that. We aim to build people. It's part of our culture here is to build people, right? And improve results. Who wouldn't want to do that? One thing I've seen many times in my 15 years of HR are managers that like to exercise their authority. They like to flex their muscle in these cases, and instead of being helpful. And I think we need to approach these things with a different attitude. When conducting corrective action and and we found that the person has violated policy, perhaps in a progressive corrective action step, a level of shame should be felt by that individual to help sharpen their conscience. It's important that we communicate in a way that's building, but the level of shame is felt. So it's a bit of a tough balance to have, but one that we should find. In positive constructive discipline, employee mistakes are used to help them learn how to change. We build people, right? And again, that is resetting expectations. That is showing care for the individual and care for the company simultaneously. And it's realigning that individual with the company objectives. And it's not, these are not gotcha moments. Oftentimes I've seen in managers that the performing corrective action is more of a gotcha moment rather than a how do we work together and make this a better situation. The discussion focuses on the problem and how it can be solved rather than blaming, right? If terminations result, we handle that person with as much respect as possible. And you walk them out the door, you wish them well. Sometimes in some cases, we can even become a reference for future employment. If we're very aware of the gifts and talents that they have, maybe it went wrong somewhere at work, but if we're aware of their gifts and talents, we can even terminate a person with a way to help them in the future. I've seen people have good jobs even beyond smart. Joe, I see a hand up. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll jump in for a couple things. I mean, I love this. Kyle, I have to hand it to you because every time we've had this kind of a conversation, and unfortunately we have had to let a few folks go, and the book had some really interesting things to say about this. And I think it would be kind of fun for us to have a dialogue as a team about about performance and about how to set people up for success, and then also if it's not working out, how to address those things. I would love to actually create it. I don't want to step on your presentation and your discussion, Kyle, but I do think it would be pretty helpful for us as a team to maybe ask a question. And the question is if you guys remember in the book, one of the biggest things that it was talking about was the love part of all of this stuff, right? And the question posed is, how do you have a relationship so strong with people that if it turns out to not be the right fit, that you still have an amazing relationship with that person? I want to cast that out to the group. How do you actually do that? What's your guys' experience like? What are things? I see Tara came off mute. If you wanted to jump in, I would love it.
Okay. Yeah, I wanted to lean into it a bit. I think being transparent, being very engaged with the employee by following their progress or lack thereof, staying engaged with them, letting them know how they're doing, if they're doing well, if they're not doing well. I think a lot of times they see it coming, because they know where they are with their performance. A lot of times they start to fall back. I think a lot of times they're looking to be rescued, but just not bold or brave enough or courageous enough to make that decision on their own. But
I think too proud, right?
Yeah, I think building that trust with them, being loyal to them by being honest with them as to where they are.
I think that's good.
I agree, Tara. And when they see it coming, I have literally sat down with people and they have said to me before I even started, I know what you're about to say, and so I'm just going to go ahead and get my things and leave. Okay. I have seen it to that level. And we may consider those the easy cases, but it's never easy to see a person not be successful with us. That's right. I mean, if we're really going through this process properly, everything's clean and green. We evaluate employees based on clean and green, based on our KPIs and expectations. Then this process really does set ourselves up to be effective managers. It sets themselves up to be effective employees. And it also sets this process up to be quite easy to follow.
Hey, Kyle.
It does help us remove our attitudes towards people and gets us more focused on productivity and the things that people should be doing. Go ahead, Carrie.
Yeah. I just wanted to read something out of the book here real quickly because I think
Sure.
it touches on this. So it's a paragraph. I can't tell you which page because my electronic version's different than yours. But the love element of tough love is a little subtler. This element still forces managers to confront poor performance early, but allows them to do so in such a way that much of the bitterness and ill will disappear. And here's the important part. And it all springs from the concept of talent. An understanding of talent, an understanding that each person possesses enduring patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior is incredibly liberating when managers have to confront poor performance. Why? Because it frees the manager from blaming the employee. So, we don't have to, have this thing where we're blaming the employee. It's the performance thing and the talent, and they just may be in a completely unfit position or role. But if we go on the talent and strengths part of it, we can understand a little bit more. And again, it goes back to, we don't have to do the blaming of the employee because talent frees us up of that particular thing. So.
Yeah, I love the point that you just brought up there, Carrie. The earlier that we handle these things, the easier it is. Imagine you're flying a plane and your pilot is 1 degree off. If you wait for 1,000 miles, you're going to be so far off target that corrective action is a massive adjustment. If you catch that early, it's a very little adjustment. And it's a very easy reset point. And ultimately, we're all in this together. We're in the same plane, so to speak. We should be looking at correcting things throughout and early on. Thank you, Carrie, for that. Consistency. This is basically the hot stove principle. It doesn't matter who we are, what position we hold. Each person is treated the same regardless of position and tenure. If there's a violation against the company, the stove doesn't care. It'll burn anybody. If anyone touches the stove, it'll burn them. And we have to treat everybody according to the standards of performance that we set up with people. And consistency is a huge thing. What would happen if we lack consistency throughout the organization? It turns into a real mess real quick because people start to see that. They start to see favoritism, and it can really hurt the organization. So this is just an important point. I have a question here. What are the typical effects of punitive discipline on motivation and performance levels? Performance deteriorates because of negative attitudes. It improves performance over time and creates strong work values. Remember, this is punitive discipline. That's the key term here. It changes bad performers into outstanding performers. It improves performance, but only to a minimal standard. What do you think? John, what do you think? John Martinez.
We got you on mute, John.
This is the punitive
there we go.
side of punitive discipline.
So usually that has the opposite effect, right? It's a demotivator. It does not make people want to. So I would say, yeah, it improves performance, but only to a minimal standard. So yeah, I think D.
That
Definitely.
is the typical response to it. Again, we have to be very careful how we deliver these corrective actions. It's tough love, but we do need to build people along the way, right?
Well, there is a way. I mean, in the book, it talks about it. There is a way to have tough love, but not not let it become punitive, because there's a difference. And in the punitive, like I said, it just has the opposite effect. It becomes a demotivator.
Right. The positive approach to discipline, and I've just given the answer, is a careful of an analysis of what needs to be improved in the future. It's a good, productive conversation with the individual and a careful analysis of what needs to be improved moving forward. It's a way forward. It's a positive way forward. You care about the company and you care about the individual way forward. Belinda.
I think that one of the most common mistakes that we make when we deal with performance issues is we take the position that this person is doing this intentionally because they don't care, or and so we approach it from a negative perspective, which I think is intrinsically a mistake. Most people don't go to work in the morning thinking, okay, how can I mess up today? How can I not do a good job today? How can I be miserable at work today? And we as managers, I think our knee-jerk reaction is, well, darn it, this person's not doing a good job, and we take the negative approach. I think it's a huge strategic mistake. It's a huge leadership error that we tend to make. And so going to the punitive point should not be the place we start. It should be the place we end. The first place to start is to evaluate the situation in terms of, does this person understand what is expected of them? Do they know how to perform this task? Have they proven that they can perform this task? Have we trained them to perform this task? And if all of those answers are yes, and we've checked all the boxes, and they've proven to us that they can do it, in other words, they have actually performed that task successfully in the past, only then do we get to the point where we're like, okay, so this person can do it, they know how to do it, they've shown they can do it, and yet they're not doing it. And the question is why? Are there personal struggles that they're dealing with? Or is it because they don't care? And it's only when we get to the because they don't care, that's when we should get to punitive, and not before then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And at that point, we're usually beyond rescue.
Yeah.
Um,
You should know, my personal, sorry, Carl, one more last comment. My personal thing is if I don't push the launch the button on punitive unless I've already decided this person is not salvageable. Do you know what I mean? Because really it's such a one-way street, and all the stuff that we've just said in John's comments, once you go down that road, how do you turn back? One way or the other, one way, either because we lose, it costs us money. It costs us investment because the person disengages. Yeah, all right, so maybe you're making them do it right, but where's their attitude? Where's their motivation? How do you get that back?
Mm-hmm.
The disciplinary road is a negative road, and we should end there, like you say. And by the time you get there, you've made the decision is when you should get there, not before then. It's not the first place to go.
And we should look inward as managers. Have we set them up for success? Absolutely.
Totally.
I think that is one of the biggest key points that you just mentioned. You mentioned it in the form of check boxes, but the real question is, have I done everything I can do to set this person up for success? And at that point, this can go there, right? Joe, you had your hand up really quickly.
I do. Do you mind if I share something on a quick video? I saw this wonderful short come up. And I really want to just think it would be a good way to kind of tip some things off. It's a little bit of a motivational, it's super short, and I think it'll spark a couple seconds of discussion. Do you guys mind if I share that real quick?
I'm about to the end of this really quick.
Go ahead. Yeah.
So I just wanted to do a quick exercise with all of us. Behavior or attitudes? Likes his team member. Is that a behavior or an attitude? It's an attitude. Dislikes her job. It's an attitude. You guys will see where this is going in a minute. Operates a drill press. That's a behavior. Types 60 words per minute.
That's a behavior.
Behavior. Yep. Is an effective team leader.
It's an attitude. Yeah.
That is an attitude. Yes. Is often late for work. Attitude. Often, what does that mean, right? Was absent from work 3 times last month. That's behavior, it's measured. Has an irritating voice. Attitude. Works diligently. Attitude. Some of these are good, strong sentences. John works diligently. Now we have to explain how, right? And just the other part of this is to convert some of these into investigatable or measurable behaviors. George spends too much time on each telephone transaction. So I'm going to write him up for that, right? Wrong. George, the average person spends 3 minutes on each telephone transaction. George's average is 4.5 minutes. I think we need to have a discussion with George about the time that he spends on each telephone transaction. See how that became the George spends too much time as an attitude. I have now converted that into behavior. I now look at the why and the measured behaviors. These, and I have a few of these. We won't get into them all. Jed is a great operator, by far the best on the line, right? But why is he the best on the line? Jed performs 3 times what the average person performs, and the average person performs 10. Jed's performance is around 30. That makes him by far the best person on the line, right? So
we should promote him, be a manager, because he can do more than everyone else, right?
There you go. There you go. Now you got it, Joe, right? The point of this exercise, and we won't go through all of them, is to start looking at things in measurable behaviors. That really helps us remove the attitudinal feelings we have towards people and gets down to performance. And it gets down to clean and green, and it gets down to a standard of performance that we can do proper evaluations against. It helps remove our biases, and we all have them. And so when it comes to corrective action and tough love, there are standards we need to follow, and I've outlined them pretty well in this module. This is a complex issue, and it's one that most managers get wrong because we're emotional beings. And gosh, I just hate it when George spends too much time on each telephone transaction. I want it, right? But we got to get down to investigatable and measurable behaviors to do this process properly. And it also shows the way that we care for them, because if we're setting them up for success and we are setting up a standard of performance, then they know, then it's clear to them how to operate and what to operate on, right? And we do that out of care for that individual. When we leave those things out, once again, I'm going to go back to my thing. We're playing silly games with people. And silly games win silly prizes. Let's not play silly games. Let's play real games, real performance company objectives that we need to ensure that we are following. If we want to build a race car and make this company cruise, building proper expectations with people and building people is one good way to do it. I won't get into the last part of this. It's about filing grievances. We'll save that for a future discussion. So, thank you,
So,
Joe. Go ahead.
Well, let me just jump in. Kyle, thank you so much. I have some other things. So, Joe, I'm just wondering, I'd like to kind of continue a little bit of this discussion, especially on chapter 6 next week, and wonder if we could maybe start off the discussion next week, Joe, with your
I think what
with
I
your
have
video.
can't wait. It has to be something that has to be talked about right now.
Okay.
Let's go for it, Joe.
I'm having some fun with you,
He-
Gary.
I know he is. I was waiting for that punchline.
Yeah. Here's the bottom line, and I guess I'll show it next week. But here's the bottom line to this is that I've heard this statement, and it's really made a big impact in the way that I look at life. Is that accountability is love, and I just want you guys to know that the video I was going to share you guys is heavily focused on. We have, as a society, we think we need to just work harder. We need to work more joyfully, and we need to work more lovingly. Because when you do those two things and you attach that to accountability, you actually can really show people how much you love working with them. And I can tell you this much, that love will push people a lot further. But not push, it'll help them want to go there with you. I'm just trying to tell you guys that find a way to lead your people with love. Find a way to lead your people with joy. And if you see in your people a lack of love, a lack of care, a lack of passion, and a lack of joy, they may not be in the right seat, or they may be going through something very difficult, and look for those things and find a way to have a conversation with them. Because when you have lack of performance, it always comes down to the simple things. Why? And go find out. That's what Kyle was talking about, what Belinda was talking about. And so that's what couldn't wait, Gary, because in 1 week from today, just be looking at your team. Who is working joyfully? Who is working lovingly? And if you can look for those things, you can start asking yourself, am I working joyfully? Am I working lovingly? Am I doing these things? And I can tell you that will transform your team. That will transform the work you do. That'll transform the relationship you have with your clients, your employees, with your family. Be looking for that opportunity.
So well said, Joe. Thank you for
Please,
sharing.
let's watch the video next week.
You got it.
Okay. Because I do want to continue the conversation, because there's some things we didn't touch on, and with tough love, which is really what you're talking about, is the love part of that. Now, last week I gave an assignment. I want to see if anybody remembers what the assignment was, and it has to do with love. The things you, okay, Techie?
It's about identifying things you love about work. Is that what you're referring to? And
Yep.
I think it's the 20% of those things that, as long as you love to learn, as long as you love 20% of the things you're doing, then you can really perform.
So we talked about what we love, and we talked about what we loathe. And I gave an assignment, and it may have been 2 weeks ago, but I said we were going to go for a couple of weeks writing down the things you love and the things you loathe. Those were called the red threads, right? If you don't remember that, then you may not have done it. So I need you to do it. When we have these assignments, I need you to do them. I need you to write them down. I need you to take care of what do I love and what do I loathe and what are my red threads? Because if you do it, and we understand with Joe just mentioned this, how will you know how to bring love into the equation if you don't even know what people love or loathe? if you don't know their strengths and talents, how do you bring that into it? We talked a couple of weeks ago or last week on bringing love into work. Had a whole lesson on bringing love into work. So if you haven't watched that video, you may go back and watch that. It's identified on the on the chapter headings in the videos. So make sure that you're writing down the things you love and the things you loathe. Now, I have one other thing I want you to do, and Kyle, I haven't told you yet. Well, not specifically on this, but we've talked about it. I would like you to send your Strengths Finder assessment. Please send it to Kyle, because we're going to be working on a way to take all of that information and put it into a spreadsheet. So, and Belinda, you've mentioned this before, to send it to us. Yes, so we want to send it to Kyle and start gathering, because Kyle is our HR person. And what's amazing about, what we talked about today is some of these things are legal, and, I'm watching it, I'm going, okay, so punitive and all these things. And how do we handle this stuff? Well, we have an HR officer in our company, and Kyle's here to help us with that. So you don't have to make all these decisions on your own because he went through a presentation today. What you need to do is go, I recognize something, I need to talk with somebody about this, and Kyle would be your guy to reach out to. Maybe it's your manager as well, like if you have somebody that you're reporting to. But in some cases, both of you will go to Kyle and say, hey, this is kind of a legal thing. We need to kind of make sure we're on the right path. I don't want to make promises that we shouldn't be, and that sort of thing. So reach out to Kyle for that as well. So please also send those assessments to Kyle so we can start gathering those strengths assessments and getting them into a file for our use in the company. So we can do exactly what Joe just said. So we understand what people's strengths are and what their talents are. We find out what people love and what they loathe. And then we can really, really, really bring love into the equation. Okay. So we will watch the video next week, Joe, first off, to start the discussion, and then kind of continue on. So if you didn't read chapter 6, please go back and read chapter 6, The Art of Tough Love. Okay. And then let's just real quickly before we end, let me pull this up one more time. So next week, Smart Truth 16 is chapter 27 from the team leader breakthrough in It's the Manager. So it's from the book It's the Manager, chapter 27, the team leader breakthrough. We're going to talk about how to conduct a team meeting, team dynamics, and that sort of thing. And we will talk about the art of tough love as well, and kind of continue that conversation. Any questions on that? Chapter 27. I may have put a older version of that agenda in the team file. So that is me. That's my fault if I did that. I will make sure that's corrected. But everybody on the call, for sure, that chapter 27, that's what we're going to discuss. But we will start off with tough love next week to begin with. Any other questions or comments that you guys have? Okay, none? Perfect. Thank you, Kyle, so much. That was, this is good stuff for us to learn as managers, as we're working with our team. We've got to know these things, and the art of tough love goes with it so beautifully. The culture piece of Genshai goes with it so beautifully that will really help us make smart decisions on how we treat people. So
I just want to make one last comment, and I know this was a lot of kind of lecture learning today. I don't particularly like that. I'd rather set it up to where we're participating more, but I really hope that we all learned something today from this that we can immediately apply in our lives here at work, and especially those who lead other people. And I'm here to help in this whole process. Nobody's alone in this. So I
Yeah.
appreciate all of you and thank you for your time today.
Yeah, Kyle, it was good. It was really good because, I took away a lot of things. And I love the way that it just coincides with the book. So again, we'll kind of cover a little bit more of chapter 6 next week. And maybe you can kind of top it off a little bit by saying, hey, yeah, this is what I talked about last week. This is exactly what we're doing. So I appreciate it. And I know everybody does. So you guys have a great weekend. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you all next week. Bye.